I lit candles around a dinner table set for 14. 14 places. 14 sets of silverware I polished until they gleamed. 14 napkins I folded into those little swans Thomas used to make fun of me for attempting. At 10:47 p.m., I stood in that dining room, alone, and I blew them out. One by one. The smoke curled up toward the ceiling, and I watched each flame die, and I knew. I knew nobody was coming. My voice shouldn't crack when I tell you this. It's been long enough. But sometimes, when I think about that night, about the sound of my own breathing in that silent house, about the turkey going cold in the kitchen and the pies I'd spent 2 days making sitting untouched on the counter, something inside me breaks all over again. The pain isn't dramatic. It doesn't scream. It just sits there, quiet and heavy, like a stone in my chest that never quite dissolves. My name is Evelyn Porter. I'm 71 years old now. I used to teach literature at the high school 2 towns over from where I lived. Keats and Whitman and Emily Dickinson. I spent 37 years trying to convince teenagers that poetry mattered, that words could save you when nothing else could. I retired at 63, thinking I'd finally have time to read all those books I'd been meaning to get to, thinking I'd have Sunday afternoons with my grandchildren, thinking the hard part of life was behind me. I live in a New England suburb. Or I did. Past tense. We'll get to that. I'm telling you this story because I need you to understand something. I need you to know that this can happen to anyone. That you can do everything right, love with your whole heart, sacrifice everything, and still end up completely, utterly alone. And I need you to know what comes after that realization. Because there is an after. There has to be. Before I go on, though, I want to ask you something. Tell me where you're watching from. I always imagine faces behind these stories. I picture someone in an apartment in Chicago, someone on a farm in Iowa, someone lying in bed in Seattle with their phone glowing in the dark. I wonder if you're young or old, if you have children, if you've ever felt invisible. I wonder if you'll understand, or if you'll judge me. Both are okay. I just want to know you're there. That someone is listening. Because for so long, I felt like no one was. Let me take you back. Let me tell you about the good years first, because they were good. They were so impossibly good that even now, with everything that's happened, I can't bring myself to call them anything else. Thomas and I bought our house in 1978. It was a fixer-upper, which is a polite way of saying it was falling apart. The roof leaked in 3 places. The wallpaper was this hideous floral pattern that looked like someone had thrown up a garden. The kitchen cabinets hung at odd angles, and the bathroom tiles were avocado green. But it was ours. We saved for 5 years for that down payment. 5 years of eating spaghetti 4 nights a week and skipping vacations and wearing the same winter coats until they were more patches than original fabric. We turned that house into a home. Thomas spent weekends rewiring the electrical, his hands always covered in dust and small cuts he'd wash off at the kitchen sink while telling me about his progress. I painted every room myself, standing on ladders that probably weren't safe, singing along to the radio while our kids ran circles around me begging to help. Daniel, our oldest, would dip his tiny hands in the paint and leave handprints on the walls before I could stop him. Claire would insist on stirring the paint cans even though she was barely strong enough to lift the stick. Megan, our youngest, would sit in her playpen and babble at us, her little voice providing a soundtrack to our work. We had 3 children. 3 beautiful, healthy, loud, exhausting, wonderful children. Daniel was born in 1979. Claire in 1981. Megan in 1984. They filled that house with noise and chaos and so much love I sometimes felt like my heart would burst from the fullness of it. Sunday afternoons, Thomas would set up the chessboard in the living room. He taught all 3 kids to play, starting when they were so young they could barely hold the pieces without knocking them over. Daniel took to it immediately, his little face scrunched up in concentration as he planned his moves. Claire was more impulsive, moving pieces with confidence even when she had no strategy. Megan would lose interest halfway through and wander off to draw or read, but Thomas never minded. He'd call her back gently, make the game shorter, let her win sometimes to keep her engaged. 4th of July, we'd have cookouts that drew half the neighborhood. Thomas would man the grill, wearing that ridiculous apron Daniel bought him one Father's Day that said, "Grill Sergeant." The kids would run through the sprinklers in the backyard, their screams of laughter carrying over the fence. I'd make potato salad and coleslaw and that strawberry shortcake everyone always requested. We'd sit on blankets as the sun went down and watch the fireworks over the town commons, Thomas's arm around my shoulders, our children sprawled across our laps in a tangle of sticky hands and grass-stained knees. I used to write notes and slip them into their lunchboxes. Little messages on napkins or pieces of colorful paper. "You're going to do great on your test today. Remember, I love you more than all the stars. You're braver than you think." They'd come home from school and show them to me sometimes, keeping them in their pockets or their backpacks. Daniel told me once, when he was in high school, that he'd saved every single one. He had them in a shoebox under his bed. That memory sits in my throat now like broken glass. Thomas would sneak extra marshmallows into the hot cocoa when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd wink at the kids, put his finger to his lips in an exaggerated shush, and they'd giggle as he dumped another handful into their mugs. I always knew. I always saw. But I never said anything because watching him try to be sneaky, watching our children light up with the thrill of a harmless conspiracy, that was worth more than any rule about sugar before bedtime. Everything felt safe then. Real family life. The kind you see in movies and think can't possibly exist, except it did. It existed in our house with the creaky stairs and the kitchen that was too small and the backyard with the tire swing Thomas hung from the oak tree when Daniel turned 7. It existed in the 1,000 tiny moments that make up a life, the moments you don't appreciate while you're living them because you assume they'll last forever. I thought we were building something permanent. Something that would outlast us. I thought I was teaching my children how to love, how to show up, how to be present. I thought I was doing everything right. And then Thomas died. It was a Tuesday in April. April 17, 2016. I can still tell you what the weather was like. 63 degrees. Partly cloudy. A light breeze that smelled like rain coming. Thomas was in the garden, planting tomatoes. He loved that garden. Every spring he'd spend weeks planning it out, drawing little diagrams of where each vegetable would go, calculating sun exposure and soil pH like he was preparing for a moon landing. He'd come inside with dirt under his fingernails and that satisfied smile he got when he was doing something he loved. I was inside making lunch. Tuna sandwiches. He'd asked for tuna sandwiches. I was cutting them diagonally the way he liked, arranging them on a plate with those bread and butter pickles he was always snacking on. I remember thinking I should call him in before the sandwiches got soggy. I remember looking out the kitchen window and seeing him kneeling in the dirt, his hands working the soil, completely content. And then he fell. He just fell forward, face first into the garden bed he'd been tending. I knew immediately something was wrong. I dropped the knife I was holding and ran outside, my heart already pounding, already knowing. By the time I reached him, by the time I rolled him over and saw his face, his eyes staring up at nothing, I knew he was gone. The paramedics said it was a massive heart attack. Instant. Painless. He didn't suffer, they told me, as if that was supposed to be a comfort. As if the manner of his death was supposed to soften the blow of his absence. He was 68 years old. We were supposed to have more time. We'd just started talking about traveling, about taking that trip to Ireland we'd always dreamed of. We had a whole list of places we wanted to see, things we wanted to do once I retired. And in one moment, in the space of a heartbeat, all of it was gone. His muddy boots sat by the back door for 3 months before I could bring myself to move them. They sat there like he'd just stepped out of them, like he'd be back any minute to slip them on and head back outside. I'd walk past them every day and feel my throat close up. Some nights I'd sit on the floor next to them and just cry, my hand resting on the worn leather, trying to remember what his footsteps sounded like. He left behind an unfinished project. He was always working on something, always had a plan in motion. This time it was a wooden bench he was carving for our anniversary. 45 years, we'd been married. He'd been working on it in the garage, spending evenings out there with his tools spread around him, classical music playing on that old radio he refused to replace. He'd hidden it from me because he wanted it to be a surprise. I found it after he died, half finished, the wood still rough in places, his pencil marks still visible where he'd mapped out the design. The kids were supportive at first. I need you to know that. I need you to understand that it didn't start with abandonment. It started with love, or something that looked like love. Daniel took a week off work and stayed at the house. He handled the funeral arrangements, made phone calls, greeted visitors. He was 37 then, married with 2 kids of his own, working some high-pressure job in finance that I never fully understood. He'd show up at the house in his suit with dark circles under his eyes, and he'd sit with me at the kitchen table and go through paperwork, making sure I understood what bills needed to be paid, what accounts needed to be closed or transferred. Claire came from New York. She was 35, working in marketing, living in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that cost more than my mortgage. She reorganized my pantry, went through my closets, helped me bag up Thomas's clothes to donate. She did it efficiently, methodically, like she was checking items off a list. "You don't need to keep these, Mom," she'd say, holding up a shirt or a pair of pants. "You need to let go." Megan was 32, still unmarried, still figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. She'd had 6 different jobs in 10 years, moved 4 times, always chasing some dream that never quite materialized. But she came home when her father died, and she slept on the couch for 2 weeks to keep me company. She'd stay up late with me watching old movies, the ones Thomas and I used to watch together. She'd make popcorn and curl up next to me and let me cry without trying to fix it. I was grateful. God, I was so grateful for them in those early days. I thought we were a family united in grief. I thought Thomas's death would bring us closer, would remind us what mattered. I kept telling myself that this was what family did. You showed up for each other. You held each other through the impossible. For a few weeks, it felt like that. Like we were holding each other. Daniel would visit every evening after work. He'd bring dinner, usually takeout from places he knew I liked. We'd eat together at the kitchen table, and he'd tell me about his day, about his kids, about his wife. He'd ask how I was doing, and I'd lie and say I was fine, and he'd nod like he believed me. Claire would call every few days from New York. Long calls where she'd update me on her life, her work, her friends. She'd ask what I'd eaten that day, whether I'd been sleeping, whether I'd been getting out of the house. She sounded genuinely concerned. I thought she was. Megan would text me every morning. Just a simple, "Good morning, Mom. Love you." Sometimes she'd send pictures, random things she saw during her day. A flower. A funny sign. A dog she passed on the street. Small things that told me she was thinking of me. I believed the family bond was strong enough to hold. I believed that even though Thomas was gone, we still had each other. I believed love was enough. I was wrong. The distance didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about abandonment, about being slowly erased from your children's lives. It's not dramatic. There's no single moment where everything falls apart. It's 1,000 tiny moments, 1,000 small cuts, until one day you look around and realize you're bleeding out and no one even noticed. Year 1 after Thomas died, the calls started coming late or rushed. Daniel would call at 9 p.m. instead of 7, his voice distracted, his attention clearly split between our conversation and something else. "Sorry, Mom, I've got to go. Big presentation tomorrow. I'll call you this weekend." But the weekend would come and go, and the call wouldn't happen. Claire stopped coming for Sunday visits. We'd had a tradition, before Thomas died, where she'd take the train up from New York once a month and we'd spend Sunday together. We'd go to brunch, walk around town, sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. After he died, those visits continued for a while. Then they became every other month. Then every 3 months. Then they stopped altogether. "Work is crazy, Mom. I just can't get away right now. Soon, I promise. Megan started canceling lunch plans. We'd make arrangements to meet at the little cafe downtown, the one with the good soup and the comfortable booths. I'd drive there, find parking, walk in and get a table. And then I'd get a text. I'm so sorry, Mom. Something came up at work. Can we reschedule? We'd reschedule. And then she'd cancel again. Daniel would end every conversation the same way. We'll plan something soon, I promise. We need to get the whole family together. Dinner at your place, like old times. But soon never came. The planning never happened. The promises piled up like unpaid debts. Year 2, I started eating dinner alone every night. I'd set one place at the table, just one, and I'd sit there with my meal and the silence and try not to think about all the years when that table was full. I'd try not to think about the laughter and the arguing and the chaos of feeding a family. I'd try not to think about Thomas sitting across from me, telling me about his day, making jokes that were never quite funny but always made me smile anyway. I watched my grandchildren grow through social media. Daniel's kids, Emily and Jack. I watched them have birthdays I wasn't invited to. I watched them start new schools, lose teeth, learn to ride bikes, dress up for Halloween. I'd scroll through the pictures on Facebook, enlarging them to see their faces better, trying to find traces of Thomas in their features, trying to memorize them because I never saw them in person anymore. Claire would post pictures from parties, from restaurants, from weekend trips with her friends. She looked happy. She looked like she was living a full, rich life that had no space for a mother who lived 3 hours away and didn't know how to use Instagram properly. Megan's posts were sporadic, chaotic. Job changes, new apartments, new relationships that seemed to burn bright and fast before fizzling out. I'd comment sometimes, little encouraging messages, proud emoji reactions. Sometimes she'd respond. Most times she wouldn't. Missed invitations became normal. Birthdays, holidays, simple weekend get-togethers. We're having a small thing, Mom, just keeping it intimate this year. Translation, you're not invited. We're going to Sarah's parents' house for Thanksgiving. Translation, we chose them over you. Christmas is going to be low-key, just the immediate family. Translation, you don't count as immediate family anymore. Year 3, I broke my ankle. It was January, and there was ice on the porch steps. I'd been meaning to salt them, but I'd been putting it off, being lazy, telling myself I'd do it tomorrow. I was carrying groceries from the car, bags in both hands, not being careful. My foot slipped. I felt something snap. The pain was immediate and blinding, and I went down hard, groceries scattering across the frozen ground, cans rolling down the driveway. I couldn't get up. I lay there on the cold concrete for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, trying to reach my phone in my pocket, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called 911. I didn't call my children. Some part of me already knew they wouldn't come. The paramedics took me to the hospital. They set my ankle, gave me crutches, wrote me prescriptions for pain medication. The doctor asked if I had someone at home to help me. I said yes. I lied. I went home to an empty house and figured it out myself. Daniel texted, "Heard about your ankle. Hope you're okay. Things are insane here right now, but let me know if you need anything." Claire called and talked for 5 minutes about how scary falls were and how I needed to be more careful and how she'd read an article about older adults and injury prevention. She didn't offer to come help. She didn't ask if I needed anything. She gave me advice like I was a stranger she was trying to be polite to. Megan sent flowers. A nice bouquet with a card that said, "Feel better soon, Mom." The flowers died after a week. No one came to replace them. I taught myself to use a cane from YouTube videos. I watched people demonstrate proper technique, proper weight distribution. I practiced in my hallway, back and forth, until my hands blistered from gripping the handle too hard. I learned to navigate my house on one foot and a cane and sheer stubborn determination not to need anyone. Years 4 through 7 blur together now. They were all the same, really. A painful montage of being slowly forgotten. Birthdays forgotten. Not all of them, but enough. I'd wake up on my birthday to silence. I'd check my phone throughout the day, hoping, waiting. Sometimes a text would come late in the evening, rushed and perfunctory. Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, crazy day. Sometimes nothing would come at all. I stopped expecting anything. Stopped hoping. Hope hurts more than disappointment. Holidays alone became my new normal. I'd make a small meal, just enough for one. I'd watch television, whatever marathon was on, trying to fill the silence with other people's voices. I'd see pictures online of my children celebrating with their own families, with their in-laws, with their friends. Never with me. I sent gifts that were never acknowledged. Birthdays, Christmas, graduations, anniversaries. I'd spend hours picking out perfect presents, writing cards with messages that took me multiple attempts to get right. I'd mail them weeks in advance to make sure they arrived on time. And then nothing. No thank you. No acknowledgement. I'd have to check with the post office to confirm delivery because I never heard whether they'd been received. My voice messages were played but never returned. I could see it on my phone, that little read indicator that told me they'd listened. I'd leave messages trying to sound cheerful, trying not to sound desperate. Hi sweetie, just checking in. Give me a call when you get a chance. The calls never came. I'd wait days, then weeks, then eventually I'd give up and call again, leaving another message that would also go unanswered. I stopped asking questions. I stopped reaching out. I stopped trying. I just stored the silence, let it accumulate like dust in empty rooms, until the quiet became the only thing I knew anymore. Somewhere in those years, something inside me died. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just a slow erosion of hope, of expectation, of belief that things would get better. I woke up one morning and realized I'd stopped imagining family dinners. Stopped planning holiday gatherings. Stopped believing that my children loved me, or if they did, that their love meant anything at all. And then came Thanksgiving. Year 8. I tried one last time. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. Maybe some part of me still believed in miracles. Maybe I just needed to know for certain, to have proof that I could point to and say, here. This is when I knew it was over. I sent the invitations in September. Months in advance. I wanted to give them plenty of time to plan, plenty of time to say yes. I sent them in the mail, actual physical invitations on nice cardstock that I bought from the stationery store. I wrote personal messages in each one. Told them how much it would mean to me. Told them I missed them. Told them I wanted us to be a family again, even if just for one day. Daniel's response came via text, got your invitation. We'll see how things look closer to the date. Sarah's family is also hoping to see us. Claire emailed, that's so sweet, Mom. I'll have to check my work schedule and let you know. Megan called, which felt like progress. I'd love to come, Mom. Let me just figure some things out first, okay? She sounded sincere. I believed her. As November approached, I followed up. Gentle reminders. Just wanted to check in about Thanksgiving. Do you think you'll be able to make it? The responses were vague. Non-committal. We're still figuring things out. I'll let you know soon. Probably, but I can't confirm yet. I cooked everything anyway. I couldn't help myself. I woke up at 5 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day and I started cooking like I was expecting an army. Like it was the old days when my house was full of people and noise and life. I made 4 pies. Apple, pumpkin, pecan, and that chocolate cream pie Daniel used to love as a child. I made the crusts from scratch, rolled them out on the counter, crimped the edges with my fingers until they were perfect. I made the fillings from Thomas's mother's recipes, the ones written on index cards stained with decades of use. I made a turkey large enough to feed 2 families. A 22-pound bird that barely fit in my oven. I brined it overnight, stuffed it with the cornbread stuffing Thomas always requested, basted it every 30 minutes until the skin was golden and crispy. I made all the sides. Mashed potatoes with real butter and cream. Green bean casserole with those French fried onions on top. Cranberry sauce from scratch. Sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping Claire used to fight with her brothers over. Dinner rolls that I shaped by hand and let rise twice. I decorated the table with the leaf-shaped placemats Thomas loved. He'd bought them at a craft fair years ago, insisting they were perfect even though I thought they were tacky. I'd stored them away after he died, unable to look at them. But I took them out for this dinner, smoothed them on the table, arranged them carefully around the place settings. I set the table for everyone. 14 places. My 3 children, their spouses, my 5 grandchildren, and me. I used our good china, the set Thomas and I got as a wedding gift that we rarely used because it seemed too nice for every day. I polished the silverware. I folded napkins. I put out wine glasses and water glasses and the crystal bowl for the cranberry sauce. I put on a nice dress. Did my makeup. Fixed my hair. I wanted to look good for them. I wanted them to see that I was still here, still trying, still their mother. And then I waited. 5 o'clock came and went. That was when I'd told them dinner would be ready. I kept everything warm in the oven, checking it every few minutes, adjusting temperatures, making sure nothing would dry out or burn. 6 o'clock. I called Daniel. It went to voicemail. I called Claire. Same. I called Megan. She didn't answer either. 7 o'clock. I sent text messages. Just wondering what time you'll be here. Dinner's ready whenever you arrive. No responses. Not even the little read indicators that would tell me they'd seen the messages. 8 o'clock. I called again. All 3 of them. Left voicemails trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound panicked or angry or hurt. Hi honey, just checking in. Let me know when you think you'll get here. 9 o'clock. I sat at that table, at one of the 14 places I'd set, and I stared at the food getting cold. At the wine I'd opened to let it breathe. At the candles I'd lit because Thomas always said candlelight made everything special. 10 o'clock. I checked my phone obsessively, refreshing my messages, my email, my Facebook. Nothing. Not a word. Not an explanation. Not an apology. Not even the courtesy of a lie. 10:47 p.m. I stood up. I walked around that table, and I blew out every single candle. I watched the smoke rise in the darkness, and I whispered to the empty room, I'm done setting tables for people who never planned to sit at them. I didn't cry. That's what surprises me most when I think back on that night. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. Hollowed out. Like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that mattered and left nothing but a shell. I threw away the food the next day. All of it. The turkey, the pies, the sides, everything. I couldn't stand looking at it anymore, at the evidence of my delusion, at the proof of how little I mattered to the people I'd devoted my entire life to. But here's the thing. Here's what I haven't told you yet. Here's the secret that changes everything. Thomas had money. A lot of money. We never talked about it. Not with the kids, not with friends, not with anyone. We lived modestly because that's how we wanted to live. We didn't need fancy things or expensive vacations or showy displays of wealth. We were happy with our little house and our simple life. But Thomas was smart. Brilliant, actually, when it came to money. He worked as an accountant, but on the side, quietly, he invested. He built a portfolio of rental properties, small apartment buildings, a few commercial spaces. He bought farmland when it was cheap and held onto it while it appreciated. He played the stock market with a careful, patient strategy that paid off year after year. He did it all so quietly that even I barely noticed. He managed everything, and I trusted him. He'd show me the statements occasionally, tell me we were doing well, but I never paid close attention to the numbers. Money wasn't what mattered to me. Family was what mattered. The kids always assumed we did all right. They knew we weren't struggling, knew we could pay our bills and take care of ourselves. But they had no idea how much Thomas had accumulated. No idea about the properties, the investments, the accounts spread across multiple banks and brokerages. When Thomas died, it all came to me. The house, the properties, the stocks, the bonds, everything. I met with his financial advisor, a man named Robert who Thomas had worked with for 20 years. Robert walked me through everything, and I sat there in shock as he showed me spreadsheets and account balances and property valuations. "You're a wealthy woman, Mrs. Porter," he said. "Your husband was very, very good at what he did. I've been managing everything since Thomas passed. Robert helped me, taught me what I needed to know. I sold off a few properties that were more trouble than they were worth. I restructured some investments. I learned how to read financial statements, how to evaluate market trends, how to make decisions about money that I'd never had to make before. And I did it successfully. The portfolio grew. The income from the rentals kept flowing. I was more financially secure than I'd ever been in my life. My children had no idea. None. They knew I was comfortable, but they had no concept of the actual numbers. They didn't know about the rental income. They didn't know about the stock dividends. They didn't know that I'd been quietly paying off Daniel's mortgage for him, sending money to Claire when she complained about New York rent, funding Megan's endless stream of career changes and moves. I'd been supporting them financially without them even knowing. Without them even asking. Just quiet transfers from my accounts to theirs, because that's what mothers do. We give, even when we get nothing back. But after that Thanksgiving, after sitting at that table alone while the candles burned down and the food went cold, something shifted in me. I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. I was furious. I was done. I didn't confront them. I didn't call them crying or send them long emails detailing their failures as children. I didn't guilt them or manipulate them or try to make them feel bad for abandoning me. Instead, I took action. I called Robert the Monday after Thanksgiving. "I need to restructure everything," I told him. "I need everything in my name only. I need to close any accounts that have beneficiaries. I need to sell the house. I need to disappear." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Porter?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." It took 3 months to execute. 3 months of meetings with lawyers and financial advisors and real estate agents. 3 months of paperwork and signatures and decisions. I met with my attorney first. A sharp woman named Patricia who Thomas had worked with on estate planning years ago. I told her what I wanted to do, and she didn't try to talk me out of it. She just nodded and said, "Let's make sure we do this right." We restructured my will. Removed my children as primary beneficiaries. Set up trusts for my grandchildren instead, accessible when they turned 25, controlled by an independent trustee who would ensure the money went to education and genuine needs. Not a penny would flow through their parents' hands. We closed every joint account I'd ever opened to help my children. The savings account I'd set up for Daniel's kids' college fund that he'd somehow started treating as his personal ATM. The credit card I'd given Claire, for emergencies, that she used for everything. The checking account I'd put Megan on when she was going through a rough patch that had lasted 3 years. We ended all the automatic financial support I'd been giving without them knowing. The mortgage payments, the rent contributions, the random transfers when they complained about being short on money. All of it stopped. I sold the family home. The house Thomas and I had bought and fixed up and filled with memories. The house my children had grown up in. The house they assumed would always be there, would always be theirs eventually. I put it on the market in February. It sold in 3 days. A young couple with a baby on the way, their eyes shining as they walked through the rooms, talking about paint colors and furniture arrangements and all the life they were going to live there. It should have broken my heart to sell to them. Instead, I felt relief. My preparations were calm, methodical. I wasn't acting out of spite or revenge. I was acting out of self-preservation. I was saving myself the only way I knew how. And then I left. I moved to a small coastal town in Georgia. A place I'd never been before, where no one knew me or my history or my pain. A place where I could start over. I found a cottage online, a small waterfront property with a porch that overlooked the marsh. It needed work, but that felt appropriate. A fixer-upper, just like the house Thomas and I had started with all those years ago. A place that needed love and attention and someone willing to see its potential. I bought it with cash. Moved in with just my clothes and a few boxes of things I couldn't bear to part with. Photos of Thomas, the unfinished bench from the garage, some books, some kitchen items. Everything else I donated or sold or left behind. The cottage has big windows that let in the light. The porch has a swing where I sit in the mornings with my coffee and watch the herons hunt in the shallow water. There's a small garden where I've started growing tomatoes, continuing Thomas's tradition. The town has a library, a bookstore, a few restaurants, a community center. It's quiet. It's peaceful. It's mine. I joined a poetry group that meets every other Tuesday evening at the library. 8 people, mostly women my age or older, who gather to share poems we've written or poems we love. I hadn't written poetry in years, not since college, but I've started again. Short pieces about loss and letting go and finding yourself in the wreckage of who you used to be. I volunteer at the library twice a week. I help with the children's reading hour, sitting in a rocking chair while kids sprawl on cushions around me, their faces rapt as I read stories about brave mice and magical wardrobes and children who save the world. Their attention feels like a gift. They actually want to be there. They actually want to hear what I have to say. I adopted a dog. An old rescue named Poppy who's missing one eye and has arthritis in her back legs and needs medication twice a day. The shelter worker tried to warn me that she might not have much time left, that older dogs are harder to place because people don't want to deal with the grief. I knelt down in front of Poppy's cage and looked into her one good eye, and I said, "I know exactly how you feel." I took her home that day. Poppy sleeps on the bed, snoring softly, taking up more space than a 30-pound dog should. She follows me from room to room, her nails clicking on the hardwood floors. She sits next to me on the porch while I read, her head resting on my lap, her tail thumping contentedly whenever I scratch behind her ears. For the first time in years, I laugh without feeling guilty. I laugh at silly things on television, at jokes the librarian makes, at the way Poppy tries to chase the marsh birds even though her legs can barely support her weight anymore. I laugh and it doesn't feel like a betrayal of my sadness. It just feels human. It feels like living instead of just surviving. Months passed before my children even noticed I was gone. Months. Let that sink in. I uprooted my entire life, sold the family home, moved to a different state, and it took them months to realize. It was Daniel who discovered it first. He'd apparently decided to drop by, unannounced in July. Nearly 9 months after that Thanksgiving dinner where no one showed up. 9 months of silence on his end that he probably thought was reasonable, normal, acceptable. He showed up at the house on a Saturday afternoon and found strangers living there. A young couple answered the door with confusion and mild alarm at this man demanding to know where his mother was. They told him they'd bought the house in February, that they'd never met the previous owner, that all the communication had gone through real estate agents and lawyers. Daniel called me 17 times that day. 17. I watched my phone light up over and over while I sat on my porch with Poppy, drinking iced tea and watching the afternoon light turn golden on the water. I didn't answer. After 8 years of my calls going unanswered, of my messages being ignored, he could wait. Claire tried contacting the bank. She called my old branch, the one I'd used for 30 years, and demanded information about my accounts. They told her, correctly, that they couldn't give her any information, that the accounts had been closed, that I'd moved my banking elsewhere. She called me next, her voice shrill with panic on the voicemail she left. "Mom, what's going on? Where are you? Why are you doing this to us? Doing this to them. As if my leaving was somehow an act of aggression against them rather than an act of survival for me. Megan emailed me frantically. Long, rambling messages that pinged into my inbox one after another. Mom, please answer your phone. Mom, we're worried about you. Mom, this isn't funny anymore. Mom, you can't just disappear like this. Mom, please at least tell us you're okay. Worried about me. Now they were worried. Not when I broke my ankle and struggled alone. Not when I spent holidays by myself year after year. Not when I stopped reaching out because the rejection hurt too much. No, they were worried now. Now that I'd removed myself from their orbit. Now that I wasn't available to be ignored on their terms. They didn't panic out of love. Let me be very clear about that. They panicked out of fear. Fear of what this meant for them. Fear of lost inheritance. Fear that I'd done exactly what I had done, which was cut them off financially and emotionally and permanently. I waited a week. Let them sit with their panic. Let them feel a fraction of the abandonment I'd felt for years. And then I wrote one email and sent it to all three of them. Subject line, I'm fine. The email read. To my children. I'm writing this once, and I won't be repeating myself, so please read carefully. I am safe. I am healthy. I have relocated to a place where I can live peacefully without the constant pain of being forgotten by the people I devoted my life to raising. For 8 years, I have reached out. I have called, texted, emailed, invited. I have shown up for you in every way I knew how. I have celebrated your successes from a distance, mourned my exclusion from your lives in private, and waited patiently for you to remember that I exist. That Thanksgiving dinner I prepared for 14 people while not one of you bothered to show up or even call to cancel, that was my breaking point. I sat alone at a table I'd set with love and hope, and I watched the candles burn down, and I realized something that should have been obvious long before: I was not a priority to you. I was not even a consideration. You may have busy lives. You may have valid excuses. You may genuinely believe that you've done nothing wrong. But intention doesn't erase impact. Your absence has carved a hole in my life that no amount of rushed phone calls or perfunctory text messages could fill. I left because I had to save myself. Because continuing to wait for love that never came was killing something essential inside me. Because I deserve better than being someone's afterthought, even if that someone is my own children. I have relocated. I will not be sharing my address or details about my new life because I need to protect the peace I've fought so hard to create. If you need to reach me, you can email this address. I will respond when and if I choose to. Regarding finances, since I know that's likely your primary concern, the money is mine. The house was mine to sell. The accounts were mine to close. I owe you nothing, legally or morally. Your father and I built our wealth through decades of hard work and careful planning. We supported you through childhood, through college, through the early years of your adult lives. We gave you everything we had to give. What I've been giving you since your father died, the financial support you didn't even know you were receiving, that has ended. You are all adults with careers and families. You can and should support yourselves. I have, however, established educational trusts for each of your children, my grandchildren. When they turn 25, they will have access to funds for college, graduate school, or to start their lives as adults. The money is theirs, controlled by an independent trustee, not accessible to you. They will also receive letters I've written for each of them, explaining my side of this story, so they understand why their grandmother disappeared from their lives. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, it must be earned. It cannot be based on financial incentive or family obligation or guilt. It must be based on genuine care, consistent effort, and mutual respect. It must be the kind of relationship where you show up, not just when it's convenient, but when it's hard. Where you call not because you need something, but because you want to hear my voice. Where you remember me on holidays and birthdays and random Tuesdays because you miss me. I don't know if you're capable of that kind of relationship. I don't know if you want to be. But I'm done begging for crumbs of affection from people who should love me unconditionally. I am not your mother first and a person second. I am a person who happens to be your mother. I have value beyond what I can provide for you. I have a life that matters beyond how it intersects with yours. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. I hope you're living lives that fulfill you. But I can no longer sacrifice my own happiness and health waiting for you to include me in those lives. The relationship, if you want it, is yours to pursue now. I'm done chasing. Mom. I read that email 20 times before I sent it. Made sure every word was exactly what I meant to say. Made sure my anger was clear but not uncontrolled. Made sure my pain was evident but not manipulative. Made sure my boundaries were firm. And then I hit send and I turned off my phone for 3 days. I didn't want to see their responses immediately. Didn't want to be tempted to engage right away. I needed space to breathe, to sit with what I'd done, to prepare myself for whatever came next. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were 47 missed calls and 63 text messages and 12 emails. I made myself coffee, sat down on my porch, and read through them methodically. Daniel's response came first, and it was exactly what I expected. A long, defensive email explaining why he'd been so busy, listing all his responsibilities, his job stress, his kids' activities, his wife's needs. He talked about how he'd always assumed I was fine, how I never seemed like I needed help, how I should have told him directly if I was feeling neglected. He turned my abandonment into his misunderstanding, my pain into his innocent mistake. There was no apology. Not a real one. Just, I'm sorry you felt that way, and I'm sorry if I made you feel forgotten. If. As though my feelings were hypothetical. As though the 8 years of documented neglect were open to interpretation. He ended by saying he hoped we could work through this and get back to normal. Normal. He actually used that word. As if normal hadn't been me suffering in silence while he lived his life without me. Claire's response was angry. I'd expected sadness, maybe guilt, but no. She was furious. How dare I sell the house without telling them? How dare I move without giving them a forwarding address? How dare I cut them off financially without warning? How dare I set up trusts for the grandchildren that they couldn't access? She accused me of being manipulative, of playing games, of using money to punish them. She said I was being selfish, thinking only of myself, not considering how this affected them. She said I'd always been overly sensitive, that I took things too personally, that I needed to understand that they had their own lives to live. She didn't address the Thanksgiving dinner. Didn't mention the years of ignored calls and canceled plans. Didn't acknowledge that anything she'd done might have hurt me. It was all about how my response to their neglect was unfair to them. She ended by saying that if this was how I wanted to play it, fine. She had plenty in her life without needing a mother who was going to be dramatic about every little thing. Every little thing. 8 years of abandonment was every little thing. Megan's response came 3 days after the others. It was shorter, less polished. She tried to use guilt, just like I knew she would. She talked about the grandchildren, about how they asked about me, about how confused they were that Grandma had disappeared. She said I was being cruel to them, punishing innocent children for their parents' mistakes. She reminded me of all the times she'd been there for me, conveniently forgetting that those times had been 8 years ago, right after Thomas died, and that she'd been absent ever since. She said she'd always thought we were close, that she couldn't understand why I was doing this. And then, the kicker, don't you care about your grandchildren? Don't you want to know them? How can you just walk away from them like this? As if I'd walked away. As if I hadn't been pushed out gradually, year after year, event after event, until I was so far on the outside that leaving entirely was just acknowledging reality. Not one apology. Not from any of them. Not one acknowledgement of the hurt they'd caused. Not one admission that maybe, possibly, they could have done better. 3 months later, a lawyer contacted me. One my children had hired, apparently pooling their resources for this united front they'd never managed for an actual family gathering. The lawyer sent a formal letter expressing concern about my mental state, about my decision-making capacity, about whether I'd been unduly influenced to make such drastic changes. They were trying to claim elder abuse, financial exploitation. They were trying to suggest that I wasn't competent to make my own decisions about my own money and my own life. Patricia, my attorney, handled it beautifully. She sent back documentation of every meeting we'd had, every decision I'd made, every competency evaluation I'd passed with flying colors. She included statements from Robert, my financial advisor, about my sharp understanding of my portfolio and my clear, consistent instructions about how to manage everything. She included a letter from my doctor confirming that I was in excellent mental and physical health. The lawyer backed off quickly. Probably told my children that they had no case, that I was clearly of sound mind, that pursuing this would only make them look worse. I never heard from that lawyer again. The whole thing was over in 2 weeks. A desperate attempt that failed because the truth was simple: I wasn't being manipulated or exploited. I was just done. And then I got to live my new life. My real life. The one I'd chosen for myself. I funded literacy programs in rural Georgia. Small initiatives that taught adults to read, that provided books to children who couldn't afford them, that supported libraries in communities that were struggling. I gave anonymously, not wanting recognition, just wanting to make a difference with the money Thomas had worked so hard to accumulate. I found Thomas's unfinished bench in storage. I'd kept it, unable to leave it behind, unable to finish it myself. I hired a local woodworker, a kind man named James who was retired and took on projects just for the love of the craft. I showed him Thomas's design, his pencil marks, his vision. Together, we completed it. The bench is beautiful. Sturdy oak with a curved back, arm rests that slope gently, a smooth seat that fits the human body perfectly. James carved Thomas's initials and mine into the back, small and discreet, a private marker of the love that inspired its creation. I donated it to the community park in my new town. It sits under a willow tree near the water, and I walk by it sometimes and see people sitting there. Couples talking, parents watching their children play, elderly people resting in the shade. Thomas's final project, serving its purpose, being used and appreciated by strangers who will never know its story. I travel now. I've been to Ireland, the trip Thomas and I planned but never took. I stood on the cliffs of Moher and cried, wishing he could see the view, wishing his hand was in mine. I visited Scotland, saw the Highlands and the castles and the lochs. I went to Italy, ate pasta in Rome and gelato in Florence and stood in the Sistine Chapel with my head tilted back in wonder. I travel alone, but I'm not lonely. I meet people, have conversations, make temporary connections that feel real even though they're brief. I'm not trying to fill the space my children left. I'm just living, experiencing, taking up the room in the world that I'm entitled to. I created educational trusts for each grandchild. Emily, Jack, Tyler, Sophie, and little Anna, Megan's daughter from a relationship that didn't last. Money set aside for their futures, managed by professionals who will ensure it's used wisely. Letters written for each of them, to be opened when they turn 18, explaining who their grandmother was, what happened, why I made the choices I made. I don't know if they'll understand. I don't know if their parents will poison them against me before they're old enough to read those letters and decide for themselves. But I've given them the truth. I've given them the option to know me, even if only through words on paper, even if only after I'm gone. I write in the mornings now. Poetry, mostly, but also longer pieces. Reflections on motherhood, on loss, on rebuilding. Pieces about what it means to love people who don't love you back. About the specific grief of being forgotten by your own children. About the courage it takes to leave, and the strength it takes to stay gone. Some of my poems have been published in small literary magazines. Nothing major, nothing that would make me famous, but seeing my words in print, knowing someone thought they were worth sharing, that means something. It means I exist beyond just being someone's mother. I exist as myself, Evelyn, a woman with thoughts and feelings and something to say that's worth hearing. I sit on my porch most evenings with Poppy curled up next to me, and I watch the sunset paint the marsh in gold and pink and purple. I listen to the birds settling in for the night. I feel the breeze coming off the water. And I'm content. Not happy every moment, not without sadness or regret or the occasional sharp pain of missing what I thought my life would be. But content. At peace with the choices I've made. And then, months later, something shifted. It was a Tuesday evening. I was reading on the porch, Poppy snoring softly at my feet, the light fading into that blue twilight I've come to love. My phone, which I'd gotten used to mostly ignoring, buzzed with a notification. An email from Megan. My finger hovered over the notification for a long moment. I was tempted to delete it without reading. I'd trained myself not to hope, not to expect anything good from that quarter. But something made me open it. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe just the fact that it was Megan, the baby, the one I'd always had the softest spot for even when I shouldn't have. The email was short. Mom. I know I have no right to reach out. I know I don't deserve a response. I'm not asking for one. I just need you to know something. I started therapy 3 months ago. Not because of you, or not entirely. I've been struggling, and I finally admitted I needed help. But in therapy, I've been talking about my family, about my childhood, about the years since Dad died. And I'm seeing things I couldn't see before. Or maybe I'm finally letting myself see things I always knew but didn't want to admit. You're right. About everything you said in your email. We abandoned you. I abandoned you. I let life and work and my own problems become excuses for not showing up. I told myself you were fine, that you didn't need me, that there would always be time later. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. I can't speak for Daniel or Claire. I can only speak for myself. What I did to you, the way I treated you, the way I let years pass without really being present, it's unforgivable. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I see it now. I understand what I've done. I don't care about the money. I never did, not really. I know that's hard to believe given how things look, but it's true. What I care about is that I hurt my mother. I abandoned someone who never abandoned me, who gave me everything, who deserved so much better than what I gave back. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking to see you or talk to you or have a relationship. That's your choice, and whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And I'm working on being a better person, the kind of person who would never do to someone else what I did to you. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. No pressure. No expectations. Just the truth, I miss you. I love you. And I'm sorry. Megan. I read it 3 times. Looking for the manipulation, the angle, the request hidden in the apology. But I couldn't find it. It was just sad and honest and regretful. I didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not the next week. I let it sit. I let myself feel the complicated swirl of emotions it brought up. Hope and fear and anger and longing all tangled together in my chest. Poppy looked up at me with her one good eye, her tail giving a tentative wag, and I scratched behind her ears and whispered, I don't know what to do with this. She licked my hand. Dogs don't have answers, but sometimes their presence is answer enough. It's been 2 months since that email. Megan hasn't sent another one. Hasn't pushed. Hasn't demanded a response or tried to force her way back into my life. She's just there, waiting, in the way I waited for them for so long. I still haven't responded. I don't know if I will. Part of me wants to reach out, to see if this change is real, to test whether she means what she said. Part of me wants to protect this peace I've built, this life I've created where I'm not constantly bracing for disappointment. What matters is this, I have the power to choose. For the first time in 8 years, I'm the one with the power. I'm the one who gets to decide if and when and how we reconnect. I'm not waiting by the phone. I'm not setting tables for people who won't come. I'm not hoping for crumbs of attention. I'm living my life. A good life. A life I built from the wreckage of my expectations, from the ruins of the family I thought I had. I built it with my own hands and my own heart and my own stubborn refusal to let their abandonment destroy me. If Megan has really changed, if she really understands what she did and wants to make amends, then maybe someday we'll talk. Maybe someday I'll let her into this life I've created. Maybe someday she'll sit on my porch with me and meet Poppy and hear about the poetry group and the library and the traveling and all the ways I've learned to be okay without her. But that day isn't today. Maybe it won't be tomorrow either. Maybe it won't ever come. And I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with protecting myself, with choosing my own peace over their potential redemption. Because here's what I've learned: sometimes the hardest freedom is walking away from people you love. People you carried in your body, nursed at your breast, rocked to sleep, worried over, sacrificed for. People who are supposed to be your forever, your unconditional, your safe place to land. Sometimes those people hurt you. Not through some dramatic betrayal, but through 1,000 small absences. Through forgotten calls and missed holidays and years of treating you like an afterthought. Through loving you in theory but not in practice. And sometimes, the only way to love yourself again is to leave. To pack up your pain and your disappointment and your shattered expectations and move somewhere new. To build a life that doesn't center around waiting for them to remember you exist. It's not giving up. It's not being bitter. It's not revenge. It's survival. It's choosing yourself when no one else will. It's saying your needs matter, your feelings matter, your presence matters, even if your own children can't see it. I matter. Me, Evelyn Porter, 71 years old, retired literature teacher, poetry writer, library volunteer, owner of a one-eyed dog named Poppy. I matter beyond my role as mother. I matter beyond what I can provide. I matter just because I exist, because I'm human, because my life has value. And I refuse to spend whatever years I have left waiting for people who have made it clear, through their actions if not their words, that I don't matter to them. So I'm here. In my cottage by the marsh. Living my life. Reading my books. Writing my poems. Feeding my dog. Watching my sunsets. Talking to my poetry group. Volunteering at the library. Traveling when I want. Existing on my own terms. If my children want me in their lives, they know how to reach me. The door isn't locked. But they'll have to knock. They'll have to wait. They'll have to prove that they want a relationship with me, not with my money or my usefulness or some idealized version of a mother who exists only to serve them. They'll have to want me. The real me. Complicated and hurt and no longer willing to settle for scraps. And if they never knock? If they never try? If the only response to my leaving is anger at what they lost rather than regret for how they treated me? Then I'll keep living this life I've built. This good, peaceful, fulfilling life where I matter to myself. Where I show up for myself every single day. Where I'm the person I always was for them, but directed inward, toward my own healing and happiness. Because I deserve that. I deserve to be the one who sets the table and knows someone will sit down. Even if that someone is just me. I deserve to light candles that don't burn down in empty rooms. I deserve to cook meals that don't go cold untouched. I deserve to celebrate holidays that feel like celebrations instead of reminders of absence. I deserve to be loved well. And if my children can't do that, then I'll love myself well. I'll surround myself with people who choose to be present. I'll build a family from friends and neighbors and fellow library volunteers and poetry group members and anyone else who shows up consistently and genuinely. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Biology doesn't guarantee loyalty. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of ungrateful children's convenience. I'm more than a mother. I always was. I just forgot for a while. But I remember now. And I'm never going back to waiting in the dark for people who never planned to show up anyway. This is my life now. Mine. I claimed it. I built it. I'm living it. And it's enough. I am enough. I always was.